Okay. What's up, everybody? Is this thing on? Can you hear me okay? I can see the comments here. I just thought I'd fire this thing up. It's been a long time since I've done a live stream. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, you might remember back in the day when I first started doing internet stuff that I did live streams kind of a lot. It was one of the first things I started doing online. Um, and it was I used to do all kinds of just random things. For me, at the time, it was like a way to blow off steam. I just thought it was an interesting and fun sort of genre, if you will, a blank canvas, an interesting way to kind of share my ideas and share what I was reading at the time or what I was doing at the time. Sometimes I would do weird kind of adventurous ones like out and about. I did this one. I don't know if anyone here remembers this. If you remember this, you're definitely OG. I was like doing ketamine in New Mexico and out late like one night, like walking around the streets. I did a live stream. Then I did some strange ones over the years. This was like more than 5 years ago, and then I kind of stopped doing live streams. I haven't done a live stream in years, literally. And um, here I'm. By the way, I'm watching the chat, and if people have anything. I will circle back to try to take questions if anyone has any. I'll circle back at the end of this session. I have an agenda, by the way. I should let you know. I've prepared a very serious agenda of talking points and news items, breaking news. And so I will, and I'm not going to display. I could do that. I could display comments, but I think best to set them off to the side. But I see you, Christian. I see you, Momofuku. What's up, people? I wonder if I'll see any people from back in the day, any of the same characters from back in the day. We'll see. But anyway, I used to do live streams a lot when I was first getting into the internet. I just found it to be a fun, creative sort of format. And then at a certain point, I stopped doing them for the reason that I just felt like they weren't. I didn't have a clear vision of what I wanted to do with them, and I felt that it wasn't accumulating into anything valuable. And so for several reasons, I just decided that I wanted to retire the approach. So I haven't done one in years. As many of you know, I had a couple kids and was forced to grow up in quite a few ways. And I also have been writing this book for about a year now. I've been pretty hunkered down on that and helping Blockchain build their audience. So I've just been pretty busy, and my whole kind of operation has kind of fell apart. Frankly, I wasn't publishing anything really very consistently. So uh, basically, now that the book is truly almost done, Blockchain is like going insanely well. I mean, the thing is launched, it's working. There's a token, it's floating, it's like crazy. I mean, it looks like it's really succeeding, and I'm still helping with them a lot, but it's like the baby is out into the world, so I feel less pressure. I feel more kind of free to do my own thing. And so now that the book is almost done, and I feel like I've gotten control of being a father, and certainly don't have it all under control, but I feel like I've settled into the identity. I've sort of bitten all the bullets that one is required to bite, and I feel like I have relinquished my youthful ego, and I am now I've just sort of capitulated to the realities of my life as a middle-aged father and husband. I feel like now I've sort of stabilized everything. Has stabilized my mood, my identity. I lost a little bit of weight. I could still probably lose a couple more, but I'm feeling good. The point is, what I'm getting at is the past few years have been a pretty wild ride, but the book is truly almost done. I'm super pumped on it as well. I'm like incredibly excited and kind of proud of it. So I'm emboldened by that. And with Blockchain being out in the world and going really well, I'm also super emboldened by that. I'm just like everything, the past few years have been hard. I've been like really focused in a kind of hole doing a few of these like high value things, relatively out of the limelight and laying low. But now it's like starting to, really come to fruition. And so, yeah, I'm just feeling like kind of like when I first started doing a live stream forever ago. There's something about the live stream format that just beckons me. It's an interesting canvas. It's just a strange, weird thing. It's always fun to kind of see what other people are thinking, or if people want to ask things. Michael James here says, I remember back in the day when you shot videos in a warehouse in your undies. I don't actually remember that exactly specifically, but I'm sure that I did. And yeah, so I'm a little less wild nowadays, but I still like the live stream genre, if you want to call it that, as just a very interesting canvas. And you know what I will also say is I've been kind of inspired by some of the new stuff coming out, especially that sort of live stream, especially the kind of Twitter centric live stream formats. I think it's very interesting, like like the TBPN, if you've seen these guys, the Technology Brothers podcast crew. It's like they're doing basically tech news, but kind of Twitter first or X first. And it's really pretty interesting. I kind of, I've been paying attention to them. That's really pretty cool and intriguing. And I've also been, now that I, work with Nocchain and have been helping them build their audience, and it's going really well. I've been kind of like paying more attention to the emergent like crypto media, and there's like interesting, funny kind of like Gen Z guys, like this guy Thread Guy, who does like a live stream show. He kind of also claims to be attempting to kind of supplant CNBC, I think he said recently. So I've been paying attention to this, and I have to admit, seeing these sort of Twitter first live stream TV formats, I have to admit, I kind of was like, that is actually that looks really fun and looks really smart. Actually, I could see something like that. And so right now I'm actually streaming on Twitter. I never used to stream on Twitter, even when I was doing it somewhat consistently back in the day when I was just doing it for fun. Even then, I was mostly doing it to YouTube because the norms weren't, it just wouldn't have worked on Twitter. But now, Twitter's kind of where it's at. Yes, I'm still going to call it Twitter, by the way. I don't care. I'm insisting on that. And yeah, so all these converging factors, all these variables, I was kind of like, let's just play jazz. That's what this is all about. That's what this whole independent scholar lifestyle that I've built, this business model I've developed, and yeah, really this lifestyle that I felt called to pursue many years ago, and kind of embarked out on my own in this weird new world. I like what it's really all about ultimately for me. For some people, it's about like building the biggest audience possible, or making as much money as possible, or launching businesses or whatnot. For me, it's always been, at the end of the day, about freedom, like deep freedom, like the ability to do whatever I want when I want. Not that I want to, piss away my time doing stupid stuff. I mean, I've done a lot of that in the past, but so I've got kind of grown out of a lot of that. But nonetheless, the point still stands that at the end of the day, the indie scholar lifestyle that I've kind of fought so hard to win successfully in the past few years, the whole payoff to all of it is just pure freedom. It's if I have an idea and I just want to play jazz, I can do it. No one's going to stop me, and there's really no I set the rules. So I had this idea, came to me in a premonition recently, that maybe I would do a little pilot just for fun of some kind of TV show type format. So what I did was I kind of just went through my notes, some of the things I've been reading and paying attention to, and kind of jotted down some bullet points. And so I have no idea if I'm going to continue doing this or not. I mean, I'd love your feedback. If you find this cool or fun or edifying, definitely let me know. And I'm watching the comments, by the way. I'll address questions if you have any. But I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm just going to take a stab at this kind of creative concept I had of what would it look like to do some kind of weird TV show, maybe along the lines of the stuff that I've been doing over the past few years. So I thought I'd sort of share some things that I'm reading, some things that I'm seeing, and develop some lines of thought. I mean, my goal would be to make something quite useful and edifying, hopefully, to people. So what I did was I actually made these little overlays. Check that out, and a little agenda here. So one of the first things I want to talk about is Montaigne. So there's a chapter on Montaigne in the Indie Scholar book, and the best biography that I read or studied and kind of worked with about Montaigne is this one by this guy named Philippe Desson. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it. This book in particular is really interesting for a few reasons, and there's a few things I could share with you or teach you about the life of Montaigne, but the one that I want to kind of start with, some of this is quite well known. In the book, I think I go through some things that are much less known. But one of the points that's well known is that, Montaigne he was ambitious in a certain sense, but he was he was really not trying to, be a philosopher. He's sometimes nowadays, thought of and referred to as a philosopher, but that's not really how he thought of himself. He was basically writing notes in his own notebook, trying to make sense out of the world in his own mind, and that's a very well known sort of fact about him. One of the famous questions that he asks himself in his notes is what do I know? He was this sort of like process of self discovery is what he was doing, and the reason this is interesting is in my view, and I write about this in the book, is that there's something strange about when you have this kind of genuinely and deeply kind of private and humble sort of agenda or viewpoint on your work. It has a weird way of somehow that tends to make it, for certain reasons, even more kind of important and effective and influential to other people in a strange way. And so there's this weird thing throughout, the history of ideas where a lot of the people who are most sort of eager to be kind of politically significant with their ideas often end up falling flat, and they end up spending a lot of their life trying to achieve that, but not actually achieving it, and in the process not really doing particularly interesting work either. But those people who really seem kind of committed to this really personal, private, kind of strange and humble sort of truth-seeking lifestyle, they're the ones who seem more likely to actually produce a body of work that is particularly significant and particularly forceful. And the irony is that these people tend to surprisingly have disproportionate influence and kind of effectiveness and significance even in the political world. And you see this really, really clearly with Montaigne. And that's one of the biggest and most important through lines in this book in particular that really kind of, is different than a lot of the other Montaigne biographies, is that, Desant points out that Montaigne was quite ambitious and he was political, but the caricature for some time was that he was like genuinely kind of uninterested in all of that stuff. It seems it was not so much the case. Like his essays and his thinking and writing were kind of consciously embedded in a certain political landscape. So he was not naive, and he was not. The point is not that he's some kind of like pure, person dropping out of society. This book shows very strongly and clearly that he was intensely, kind of invested in the affairs of his community politically. You have to remember, this is early 16th century. So, there's crazy wars of religion going on. It's a really, really chaotic time. And there's massacres and things like this happening around him. He was a Catholic. But one of the cool things and interesting things about his writing is that, he's sort of like a natural Catholic. He's not writing about, how to be trad Catholic or something like that. He's not this like nowadays where people who are kind of like very kind of identitarian in their kind of religious viewpoints. He was Catholic, but he was, it didn't really sound like it when he was writing. He clearly has these sort of Catholic viewpoints and kind of assumptions. So he's a kind of natural Catholic, but he's not this self-conscious kind of like, theologian type of guy. And so another reason, one of the many reasons why, his work really quite resonates with me, and he's such an interesting kind of, I think role model, frankly, for a lot of people, working today, especially those of you in my orbit of kind of the independent scholar ecology, let's call it. So yeah, just really, really fascinating case study. And this is one of the reasons that he's in the book, because he really has, on several dimensions, a lot to teach us. And I think there was one more thing I wanted to say about him. Yeah. What's going on, Ocean Blade? Hey, I used to watch your vids a few years ago, and you just popped up. Yeah, exactly. One of the coolest things about the internet is you can fall off. You can fall off for a few years, frankly, and you're just allowed to just get right back on. And what I have noticed since I've kind of jumped back on the horse is that all the same people are kind of still there. Maybe not all the same, but you can just pop back on and you can pick back up wherever you left off. So if any of you have ever fallen off, like I fell off the past couple of years, hopefully I'm happy to report, there's literally nothing stopping you from jumping back on the horse other than psychology and inertia, which is real for sure. And so if you can just get over that, look at me. Now I have a TV show. I have a leading, best-selling number one in the what are they called? The rankings, the standards. Yeah. What are they called on TV? I don't even know. It's also alien to me. Anyway, so that's what I find really interesting and inspiring about Montaigne. Um, I will say he had a beautiful house. Check that out. Pretty beautiful. One of the things that I cannot relate to about Montaigne is that he did, come from money. He had a nice inheritance, a nice family business, but he did still have to run the business. So this is kind of interesting. Like, he did not have so much money that he could just sit around his entire life doing nothing. It's pretty hard to maintain even a nice estate. It takes a lot of work, and so he spent most of his life running the family business and maintaining this beautiful estate. And so he only starts writing relatively late in life. And as I said, his essays, they fundamentally create a new kind of genre in modern writing, the essay, but they they were really influential, but he didn't have this kind of like conscious agenda to like change the world with his essays. He was embedded in a very particular kind of political community and with a certain kind of political, hierarchy and kind of, set of political conflicts that he was embedded in. And the writings did have a kind of self-conscious role in all of that, which this book, this biography in particular, goes through so brilliantly. It's really quite interesting. But he definitely never had some kind of ambition like, oh, I'm going to innovate and create this novel kind of revolutionary genre called the essay, which no one's ever done before, and this is going to change the way that people think and write. No, and so what this is the final thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to Montaigne, the final lesson that is most interesting to me, which I read about in the book, The Independent Scholar, is that the effects that Montaigne had were not primarily through local politics. Like he was ultimately in part because of the status and notoriety achieved and respect achieved from his essays. That actually did play a role in making him more politically powerful. But that's not why we know his name today. That's not why he's so significant in the scheme of things. That's not why he is such a genuinely significant and original and impressive thinker. When you actually trace the mechanisms through which his ideas became influential, it's really interesting. And there's this other book, which I don't have on hand because it's a kind of obscure academic book that costs like $1,000 to buy, but I'll write about it later. In this really amazing literary history, I'm forgetting the guy's name, sadly, I will pull it up. He shows very convincingly that the reason Montaigne becomes so influential is that he enables a large number of other people around Europe to start thinking on their own terms and to start writing on their own terms in the way that he did. His essays, in other words, sort of bootstrapped the agency and creativity, the kind of mental and intellectual creativity of other kind of gentlemen scholars, let's call them, in Europe at the time. It was the example that he set. People would read his essays and they'd say, "Oh, I could do this," and they start thinking on their own. So he basically gives Europe this amazing kind of playbook and example of what it looks like for a thinking person to simply evaluate the world, to study, to read, to think, and to write in a way that's not professional. It's not trying to be an academic philosopher or an academic theologian or whatnot. It's not trying to be any of the sort of institutionalized molds of what it might have meant to be an intellectual or whatever. It was just man thinking. It was a certain kind of exemplary demonstration of how a educated, thoughtful individual in the 16th century could get his hand on some books, do some thinking, do some reading, and publish some original ideas. He gave them a template, a kind of style guide, and really a kind of demonstration effect, right? He kind of put it on the map as a type of person you could be and a type of writing you could do, and that it would matter, and that it would be interesting, and that people would read it, and that it was intrinsically edifying. He kind of showed all of these things through his essay genre that he more or less, kind of invents. Obviously, there are predecessors. Obviously, there's, the writings of people like Seneca or whatnot. There are many predecessors, but it's one of the most well-known, kind of commonly argued things about Montaigne, that his essays are basically, that's when we date at least the invention of the modern essay. And so yeah, that was that book was the one that really made me realize I had to put a chapter in about Montaigne in the Independent Scholar book, because what I thought that was really important, and most people don't know that, that at the end of the day, the way the Independent Scholar really functions in the history of ideas is not, it's not by like building some school of thought that's like an academic camp, and you're gonna, like take over the scientific literature or something like this, and you're gonna get more citations or something like this. It's not that. It's not. It's a kind of combination of how one lives with how one thinks and writes and publishes. That one, the Independent Scholar kind of shows his peers at the time that he's living and writing, that a different way is possible, that a different way of thinking is possible, a different way of writing is possible, and is superior, more interesting, more vitalistic and honest and authentic, faster paced, form of writing that is more fit to the historical time. So it's like the Independent Scholar is kind of updating what it means to think and write and publish at any given moment in time for the smartest people in that era, because someone has to be doing that work. And that's one way to understand kind of the role of the Independent Scholar, who the Independent Scholar is as an archetype, and how they produce, how they successfully, have effects in the history of ideas. So that's one of the ideas that you'll find in my book once I send it out. I know I've been saying this for a long time, but it is truly, it's almost done. It's just the final, I'd say the final 5% is like 80% of the work I'm learning. So yeah, that's one little lesson that I'm learning about Montaigne. I thought you might find that edifying. The book I'm talking about in this podcast is Philippe Desson, Montaigne, A Life. Amazing, amazing biography. If you're interested in politics, kind of the intellectual and historical and political dimensions of kind of, 16th century, French humanism and politics, and the wars of religion. It's really an amazing, kind of portrait into that world. So, all right. I don't see any questions yet. If you have questions, thanks for the comments, everyone. Nice to see some friendly faces. But I'd love, I set aside some time at the end to take questions. If there's anything people want to ask me about, or anything I'm talking about, if you want to double click on any of it, please do. Don't be shy. As you see, I put this little agenda at the bottom, because that kind of, will keep me on track and remind me I have to keep going. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is this lovely lady, Noor Siddiqui. She is the founder of a startup called Orchid, which is doing embryo selection as a service. Now, I recently engaged with some of her tweets because she's been in the limelight recently. She recently did a podcast with Ross Douthat, and just a few weeks ago, I was too busy to write about it or share about it. I should have, but I did a debate in person here in Austin, Texas, with Johnny Anomaly, who I've known for some time, a friend of mine, and he also is building a startup in this space. And our mutual friend organized a debate. It was a very interesting event, very fun, and Razib Khan moderated it. It was cool. Someone should have made a video. I'm sad that nobody did. It was pretty funny. I thought it was a really good time. Anyway, in preparation for that, this was a few weeks ago, I actually spent, some good time going through some of the research and going through some of the data, and really thinking about the question of IVF and embryo selection. I had never really looked at it before thoughtfully. Obviously we all have our viewpoints and assumptions, but I went through it, and there are a few things I think about IVF and embryo selection that people don't frequently think about, which are not even in any of the popular kind of arguments. Obviously, there's this kind of, back and forth right now. Many of my, very discerning and intelligent viewers and listeners will already be familiar with these. So I'm not going to rehash, some basic played out arguments pro or con on the IVF debate. But I want to bring to your attention a few arguments or ideas or facts, some stylized facts, let's call them, that are not widely understood and not widely talked about. So as a jumping off point, why don't we look at one of her recent tweets, where she says, "What if your baby never walks? What if they're never able to live independently? What if you could have stopped it but chose not to?" That's the question that orchids embryo screening forces. You optimize everything, your career, diet, skincare, but you're going to chance it on your child's genome, one of the most significant determinants of their health. Well, what I think is interesting about this, and the reason it makes a good jumping off point, is that do you notice anything strange about the way she's talking here? She's talking about your baby in the singular. But the whole point of embryo selection is that you make a bunch of tiny little babies, embryos, and then you screen them, you measure them, and you make some probabilistic assessments of what diseases they may or may not have or what traits they may or may not have. And you get to select the one that you think is best. And so I find it, first of all, very dubious, frankly, and a little dishonest. I don't know if she's purposely doing this or if it's just, she hasn't fully thought about it or whatnot. I won't accuse her one way or the other, but on a technical level, I think that this is basically dishonest. Or at the very least, it's highly misleading because her framing and her rhetoric is talking to potential mothers and fathers, as if all she's trying to do is improve your baby, your one baby. All I'm going to do is improve your one baby. Who wouldn't want that, right? She makes it seem like it's a totally free lunch. And look, if you are into this, I have lots of friends who are into this. Yes, I'm a Catholic myself, but I'm not bringing any kind of particularly ideological or religiously informed perspective here today. If you are into this, I say that's fine for you. Just bite the bullet. Say, use your language and grammar such that you are making clear about where you're getting these improvements from, and you're very technically and literally getting these improvements from the discarding of other little tiny, very early possible future babies. And so what I thought would be interesting to do, and this is what I did in my debate with Johnny Anomaly, is go through some of the less known arguments. And I actually wrote down all my notes and put them on my blog. And I want to walk you through a few of them, okay? So I want to go a little bit out of order because some of them I think are, kind of more significant than others. And one of the first arguments I want to make is that these are people, to remind you, who care a ton about things like shrimp welfare, right? They think it's these rationalist, secular, atheistic kinds of, optimizers, which is, totally fine if you want to do that. I'm an anarchist. I might be a Christian, but I'm an anarchist. If the transhumanists want to pleasure themselves to death, I'm not going to, be passing policies to stop them. I'm not. I frankly don't care. You can pleasure yourself to death or do what you want. You will face the consequences. What I'm going to argue is that even on those terms, I think IVF and embryo selection are not as good a deal as people make them sound to be. And so think about this. Like really try to unpack this a little bit. These are people who write blog posts and they think it's so smart. They think it's so funny and cool and fascinating and quirky. And look at me, I am just like so brilliantly focusing on these unconventional ways of thinking and these details of logic and facts that no one else looks at, and they're like really concerned with something like shrimp welfare, with the reasoning being, I'm of course referring to this blog post that was circulating a few weeks ago, and people were kind of talking a lot about it for many reasons. One, because it seems kind of funny, but two, because people actually really do take this very seriously. And the logic of these kind of rationalist, less wrong, utilitarian, secular, atheist people, of which, Noor Siddiqui seems to be one of them. Right? She was a Teal Fellow, so we are at the end of the day talking about relatively small circles of kind of West Coast technological forms of rational thinking and reflection. This is ultimately a pretty small world. I think it's quite fair to diagnose, orchid and less wrong and roughly in one kind of overarching sociology. Okay, and so this sociology takes it very, very seriously to think about, let's say, shrimp welfare, for the reason being, of course, that there's a large number of shrimp. So maybe shrimp are not as significant as human beings. Maybe the kind of sentience value of a shrimp is less than that of a human being, but there's so many of them around the world's oceans that even if the shrimp have like a small value, if you, like a fraction, or they're fractionally valuable as a human life, there's so many of them that you have to do this kind of like population calculation and consider the kind of expected value of all of these, life forms, right? And so, and they're kind of, sentience, however you want to, kind of think about that. That's the basic idea. In fact, mind you, this is such a strong kind of way of thinking. Let me zoom out of that for a second. That I have seen, I couldn't find it, but I remember reading it a long time ago. That I even read a blog post once from someone who presented this kind of elaborate rationalist argument about how we should be morally concerned, even possibly with the ethical status of video game characters. I kid you not. I read this somewhere. I couldn't find it. If anyone finds that, please send it over to me. But it was this like very, very thoughtful and highly concerned analysis of, what if, sure, video game characters, NPC, literal NPCs, sure, they obviously don't have the conscience or the pain receptivity that human beings have. But if you think that there's even any slight non-zero chance that a video game character is somehow possibly on a kind of gradient with consciousness, and that's a very common idea, right? That this is used as well when people talk about AI and all of the kind of rationalist AI safety arguments. This is very much a kind of common motif that a lot of smart people subscribe to, that sure, LLMs are not conscious yet, but we should treat them as like, fractionally conscious on some small non-zero degree. So the same argument can be applied to, literally I've seen it applied by these people to video game characters, okay? And, if you think about all the video games that have ever been played and all the NPC video game characters that are dying or being, punctured with some sword or something on a daily basis, it actually is a whole lot of video game characters. So we owe it, as moral philosophers, we owe it to think very carefully about the harm that could be inflicted to, video game characters or shrimp or LLMs or what have you. Okay, I think that suffices to demonstrate that this is in fact a widespread sort of motif or assumption that is really quite popular. It's not just popular in the rationalist, Bay Area secular atheist modes of thought. It's actually high status. It's like it's seen as cool and impressive. The more you kind of double click and double click and double click and expand something that all the normal people think commonsensically, they think it's absurd to be looking that carefully at something moral through a moral lens. The more obscure and tiny a thing you can drill into and argue for the very possibility of some sort of moral relevance or sentience that has some sort of ethical status, the more impressive and interesting and free-spirited your rationalist mind is. Okay, and so I just find it so hilarious that being the case, none of these people take it upon themselves to apply that lens to embryos, right? And so I'm not going to try to be some crusty, grumpy, Christian who's just going to sort of yell at you on this live stream that an embryo is a human life. Although I do tend to think that personally. I understand that if you were not religious and you're a pure materialist, you're probably not going to believe that, and that I'll let you be. I'm not gonna beat that home. But what I'm going to say is that even on materialist grounds, you actually have to do the math, and if you do the math, then the coming popularization of embryo selection will actually be a absolutely devastating kind of ethical holocaust, even if you're a materialist. And so this is obviously just back of the napkin math, but it is plausible and grounded in data that basically you fast forward the current development of embryo selection technology as it's being performed by startups such as Orchid. If you play that forward, we're probably going to be in the not too distant future, the globe is very likely going to be discarding somewhere on the order of 1 billion embryos a year globally. That's basically predictable based on current trends, where the cost of IVF is decreasing and the number of people in the world is increasing. So you can do some very basic math, and when I looked at the math, I kind of give ranges to be most realistic. But it looks to me like it'll be somewhere between 2050 and 2144, sometime in that area, that will probably have something like 90% adoption, where if just extrapolating from current trends, where like, the secular atheist, kind of fraction of the world will probably choose to do IVF because it'll be quite cheap. And as the proponents of IVF and embryo selection always make very clear, there are obvious, temptations to do it. There are obvious gains that you can have, that you can achieve in terms of like the genetic, profile of your offspring. So that's some basic back of the napkin math that I give in this blog post. And what I find is that if we get to, as I think we plausibly will, 1 billion embryos a year being discarded, then you have to give those embryos some non-zero value, even if you're a materialist. For the same reason that we care so much about shrimp welfare, and we care so much about, the the possible sentience of current LLMs, what I argue is that on materialist grounds, you should give an embryo at least, I would say, the value of 0.000302 of a human life. If an embryo at day 5, I think on materialist grounds, you should give the value of 0.0002 of a human life. That's because there's 30,000 days in full life on average, and so it's just a heuristic, but I think it's a very defensible and reasonable heuristic that in the very first 5 days of its existence, an embryo, even if you don't think it's a human life, let's say it's 0.0002 of a human life in terms of its value, or the respect that it deserves in terms of our care for life and ethics and all of this. And again, this is on purely materialist grounds. Even if you think the soul is not real and you think there are no kind of religious requirements of any kind. So to me, you cannot like seriously care so much about shrimp, and you cannot seriously care about video game characters. Or another one would be like long-term individuals, right? This is very popular. This is a term, kind of developed or pushed by William McCaskill. This idea that we are accountable on some level ethically to potential future lives. Well, you just cannot take any of these ideas seriously and not give some non-zero value to a day 5 embryo. Okay, so I find it very suspicious that, and frankly, unserious, totally implausible, that this kind of sociology that is obsessed with this type of calculation just for some reason never got around to doing it with embryos. So in this post, I give a very, very extremely conservative, a kind of assessment of a possible way to weight the value of an embryo if you don't believe in the soul. And what I find is that when you play forward the math, when the globe is doing 1 billion embryo discarding, when 1 billion embryos a year are discarded, that's pretty much like, basically killing 200,000 humans. And so, that's roughly about 73 9/11s every year. Okay. And so, I think that's pretty significant, frankly. And again, you can draw different boundaries, you can make different estimations for yourself, but what I'm mostly disturbed by, and what I call BS on, is the absolute disengagement from any of this sort of any of these considerations. Like what I find to be contemptible and just a sign of complete immaturity and unseriousness is this framing of the problem that is just it sounds like a free lunch. And of course, if you're selling a business, what better framing is there than to say, hey, I've built a product that can give you and your family pure gains at no cost other than financial cost. So buy my product, and it's just an unmitigated, unalloyed good for you and your family, and your one baby that we're going to improve. Well, that is BS. With all due respect, that is BS because you are improving the results that a family gets in terms of the kind of like functional, rationally kind of evaluated performance of the offspring that you happen to bring into this world. Yes, obviously, IVF and embryo selection promises to do that. Now, interestingly, I've read some pretty thoughtful. There are interesting technical possible objections, but I'm not going to go there because it's not my field, and I'm gonna just for the sake of argument, I'll grant that in the short term, yeah, you're going to get a certain kind of improved performance in the types of offspring that you have. That's fine, but don't act like there's no cost. And don't act like you're just optimizing one baby, because what you're really doing is helping people pick among multiple babies. And you really just don't want parents to think about that at all. And so it's truly a kind of disingenuous propagandistic rhetoric here to use this kind of singular form of baby. But then also, if we think it's so cool to do this kind of long-term population ethics calculation around, pain and well-being and pleasure and suffering, and you're willing to do it to shrimp, and you're willing to do it to video game characters, and you're willing to do it to LLMs, well, then you should be willing to do it to embryos. And if you are, then you will find that embryo selection is pretty much signing up for at least 73 September 11th happening every year in the coming future. So I make a few other arguments that I think are quite interesting and unpopular. I try to only make the kind of uncommon arguments that you haven't heard of. One is, for instance, that if IVF and embryo selection becomes normalized, like, you are not going to be producing some really significant influential bloodline or something like that. That's what a lot of these kind of like upper middle class strivers think when they think like, oh, I'm going to do IVF for all my kids because I want them to have that extra couple of IQ points or whatever they're optimizing for. Like, no, bro, you and your family are not going to be, the super people who are populating the solar system. Because in fact, once this becomes normal and everyone is doing it and there's no stigma against it, you should probably expect that the wealthiest people are going to be able to have so many more babies and so many more, superior babies to you and your family. So I did some basic math, and uh, basically any millionaire, any billionaire, of which there are a good handful in the world right now. If a billionaire decided to spend $1 billion, they could, even today, have as many as 26,000 babies by my calculation. I kind of give some napkin math here for how I get to that. And so I think what I would argue is that the only reason Elon Musk is not producing 26,000 babies through IVF and embryo selection is that it is still seen as quite weird. And it is still stigmatized. I mean, think about it. Elon Musk gets flack from the public for having like whatever 13 wives or whatever he's got. I mean, obviously in historical terms, that ain't nothing, right? It's actually not, it's not that bad at all in the scheme of things. But that's like one of the things that people give him the most crap for, like in the public, and so if we really let this cat out of the bag and people like Noor Siddiqui, end up being hugely successful and their startups, really change the norms and change the entire culture around this topic, and everyone thinks it's totally cool and good and normal and just an unalloyed good to use IVF and embryo selection in every possible context, then you should expect extraordinary and extreme kind of genetic inequality to take off. And guess what? You're not going to make the cut. Okay, it's going to be like even if you're super smart, even if you're making like $1 million or $2 million a year or something, like, no, it's nothing. You're peanuts. And in a few generations, the entire world will just be the children of the like wealthiest people who are able to have like the most optimized babies at a scale that you can't even fathom. Okay, so yeah. I think there's a lot of short-term thinking when it comes to this. Like, in the short term, it seems really tempting. It seems like do IVF and embryo selection, you'll make your kid a little bit smarter, and also you'll avoid, some disease that you're scared of them maybe getting. And they'll tell you that there's no downside. They'll tell you that there's no just the financial cost, and it's pure upside for you and your family. And on some level, to a lot of people, it's going to look like that, in the short term. But when you actually double click on all of this, and you think it through and you play it forward, it's not such a pretty picture. And I think, if you're thinking about this kind of thing, you should really, question what it is you're getting into when the kind of spokespeople for these projects and companies are really quite, I think, clearly choosing a very aggressively kind of misleading, sort of rhetoric to talk about it. I think the things that I pointed out should give you, a lot of cause for concern, and I think you should think about it. The final thing I'll say is that, and to me, I think there's a few arguments here, but you know, one of the most powerful, I think, in my humble opinion, is that I just don't think that we know what you should optimize for. Like, it's easy to say, if your family is at risk for, a particular disease or something like that, then people will be highly motivated to just choose an embryo that is not going to have that, disease profile in their polygenic score or whatnot. And again, it looks like a free lunch. It looks like just pure upside. But you have to play this forward on the population level. Like, if everyone is optimizing for something, it starts maybe by preventing, the disease that your family is particularly afraid of. But obviously, you play it forward, and people are going to be optimized. People have to choose what to optimize for on some level. Like, there is a choice required. And it's always presented as if it's like obvious in the short term, because right now it feels like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and it feels like the questions are very simple and straightforward. But do you think that as a species, do we know what to optimize for? I mean, even on rationalist grounds, even if like you totally reject all kind of religious requirements or biases, do you really feel confident that as a human being you have some sort of formula for like determining what you should be optimizing? Because it is ultimately up to you. And they say this, right? Like the Noor Siddiquis of the world say this frequently, that it's all about parental choice. It's another big part of her, kind of branding and framing and marketing. Well, okay. Does any parent really have any reliable framework or heuristic or formula or philosophy for really grounding confidently what they should be optimizing for? Should you optimize for IQ? Should you optimize for disease prevention? You can't have everything, right? There are hard trade-offs involved. And if you pull from, the genome here, you might end up, pulling, this other part of the genome in a different direction, right? So now there are arguments that there might be some particular issues that the research shows you can kind of manipulate without, causing any other trade-offs. I'm familiar with that. But at the population level, like, there's just no reason to believe, in my view, that we have any strong foundation for actually knowing what to select for. And so if there is no known reliable formula for what an individual family should select for, like, is IQ more important than, disease prevention or whatnot? Like, if we don't have a framework for that, it seems to be kind of beyond, the actual capacity of natural human reason, even with all of our, computational devices, then I just don't see how you can justify entering into that terrain. Again, I'm not even saying, I'm not, I'm not judging. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, or that we should, like, I'm an anarchist. I'm a Christian, but I'm an anarchist. So as I said, I'm really not personally losing any sleep if the Noor Siddiquis of the world want to go, do this to their embryos. I'm not losing any sleep over that. I just don't think that anyone has a strong sort of philosophical case for what exactly to optimize, in which case I think you're just opening a really terrible kind of Pandora's box for the population, personally. And you have to figure that you play this forward a few generations, and IVF embryo selectors are going to be optimizing for about the same things that Instagram people are optimizing for, right? We're just going to be having, we're going to be expressing our pathetic personalities as adults through our children. We're going to have these like, just like we give kids terrible names now, and we do all, just like all these pathologies that parents have nowadays. Um, People using their kids, to build followings on Instagram and whatnot. You've heard about like these like family YouTube channels where it's like they're just like slave driving the kids, and abusing them and stuff. Like all this kind of crazy chaos. It's just going to be applied at the level of IVF and embryo selection, right? There's no way to know what you should optimize for. So crazy parents, as the stuff gets cheaper, crazy parents are going to optimize for all of the wrong things because that's how humans are. We're fallen creatures constantly optimizing for the wrong things. Like that is kind of what we do, right? Especially at the population level. Like if you think you're really smart, fine, but you have to, even the most elite, rationalist will grant me that, at the population level, yeah, people make terrible choices, and so play that forward with IVF, and we're going to have the species is going to become just absolutely monstrous. I mean, it's going to be an absolute catastrophe. And the orchids of the world, the Norsidikis of the world, right now they think they're like really pioneering unalloyed goods for humanity through technology. And maybe in the short term there will be some positive results, but you play it forward, and the whole world I think is in for a world of pain. At least the people who are doing this, I think. Personally, I don't see myself doing it with my kids, and that's partially because I'm bound by conscience to the teachings of the Catholic Church. But I think those who choose to do it are actually in the long term opening themselves up to a world of greater pain. And on that final point, I will just say, actually, it's the Catholic Church that is the real accelerationist position on all of this, because I will remind everyone that in utero gene editing is actually where it's at. That would be my final argument, is that you should not do IVF and embryo selection. You should just wait until you can literally edit the genes of your baby inside of the mother's body, which is coming. There have already been some successes on animal models, I believe. I forget the details, but I believe we know how to do this in principle, and I think it's coming. So, and the Catholic Church is cool with this. Okay, so the Catholic Church is not some sort of reactionary, traditionalist, behind the times, Luddite institution necessarily, although in some good ways it is. The Catholic Church has said on the books that in utero gene editing would be allowed for curative purposes, and to me that's way better. That's way better. Why choose to have a holocaust of embryos around the world over the next few decades when you could just be patient and we can genetically edit babies inside of the mother's body, and we can do it with the blessings of the Catholic Church. So to me, that's the real alpha move. That's the pioneering Chad, Brave New World that I find more interesting. And I think, embryo selection is kind of like a low rent, hack job, basically, that is, when you do the math and you look at the expected value of the destruction, I think the costs outweigh the benefits in the long run. That is my case. And I'm suspicious of a kind of secular rationalist atheistic science community that is so obsessed with calculating the welfare of shrimp, but so peculiarly uninterested in calculating the potential expected welfare of embryos taken as a whole over the long term. So those are my thoughts. Those are my arguments. You can read the post at justinmurphy.studio/IVF. There's some more stuff up there if you want to see. So, all right. I don't know if people have questions or whatnot. I don't see any in the chat. I'm only looking at YouTube, by the way. I should say I can't see the other platforms. So if you have a question, I'll throw it up. At the moment, I'm not seeing any questions. So that would mean that would be the end of the Q&A. So speak now or forever hold your peace. I hope you found this interesting. This was fun. I think it's been like years since I've done a live stream, and yeah, just as I remember, it's an interesting, live, unpredictable kind of format that I miss it. Will I do more? I don't know. We'll see. When I decided I would do this pilot and just have fun with it, I did think about what future episodes would look like, and I have some notes. I would say I have like a draft agenda for like 2 or 3 more shows like this. So I think I will probably do them. I don't know, unless I go to sleep tonight, I feel like this was a waste of time and it was silly. But I think I'll do at least a few more shows. I'll be curious to hear from people if you know, find this at all interesting or valuable or fun or whatnot. Um, but like I said, now that Blockchain is out into the world, like not only does Blockchain work, but like the token is like out in the world. It's like unreal. Like I've never participated in a startup like this where it's actually gotten this far. It's like unreal to. It's been like 2 years. I mean, they've been working on this privately for about 2 years, just doing the research and development and building the product. And they only launched in May. They launched a layer one blockchain. Like this is no joke. It's like really, really serious work that they've done. This is not like some BS thing that like, you know, a layer five, you know, roll up that rolls up into a layer four, which rolls up into a layer three, which plugs into, you know, the Ethereum mainnet or something. Like this is no joke. This is a like very novel layer one blockchain built on a technical discovery, like a genuinely novel technical architecture based on zero knowledge proofs, which was not possible, you know, until recently, and which these guys had sort of like figured out. And the thing works, the thing runs, and there's a token in public, like, which is just like, it's so cool. I mean, it's so exciting, and I've never been this far working with a startup. So now that that's like happening and it looks like it's working, obviously not financial advice at all. Like, who knows? The future is uncertain. But personally, I'm like so inspired and pumped up by it that I'm kind of like, okay, I can come up for air now. Like this thing, I think is going to happen personally, and it's like a massive project. So it's like not. This is not like I said, it's a layer one blockchain, so it's either going to be like competitive with like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and up there, you know, at like in the top 50, let's say. It's either going, in my humble opinion, it's either going to like the top 50 in market cap, or it's gonna go nowhere. But the charts are going up and to the right, and so to me, it going nowhere seems like not in the cards at the moment. These are just my personal evaluations. I'm just sharing with you how I think about it. And, you know, I kind of am just stunned that, you know, we've made it this far. We've kind of like jumped through so many, you know, technical improbabilities and difficulties that not financial advice whatsoever. And, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but, you know, I look at this and I'm like, just based on my honest analysis, like this is one of the most exciting things that I've ever personally, you know, been a part of for sure. And so it's affecting the other things I'm doing. Like you know, I feel more just kind of relaxed and able to kind of come up for air and do, you know, creative, you know, content like this now that it's out into the world, and it seems to be succeeding so far. So um, yeah, it's a new morning in America as far as I'm concerned. Got a question here from Christian. Would in utero editing also allow for people to give their kids genes that neither parent has? Yeah, it's a bit above my pay grade. You have to ask Razib Khan. I'm not going to pretend to try to answer technical questions like this because it's not my expertise. I mean, yeah, I don't know what the limits are. Like, I think giving kids genes sounds like a little informal and imprecise. Like, surely there will be some limits at some point on, you know, I don't know what the hard limits are, but surely, you know, in the short to medium term, and maybe even just structurally forever, there's going to be some limits to, you know, how much you can modify. But yeah, it seems to be that it's already known how to do certain forms of limited, like, you know, spot editing. You know, like here's like something in the genome that causes a particular disease. Now we'll zap it and it will no longer cause that disease or whatnot. Again, I'm not, you know, it's above my pay grade. I don't pretend to have any technical, you know, knowledge of the details, but I do know that in utero editing, I believe it has been done officially in animals of at least one or two varieties. I'm not sure how deep that's gone, but I do believe that that's certainly possible in theory, and I do believe it's been demonstrated at least once or twice in practice. And so there's no known reason why it can't work with humans. And for the types of use cases that you know, Orchid and people like that are marketing, I do believe that like quite a lot of those things, like especially like the unit, the like one gene defects, like Tay-Sachs disease, like there's a whole class of diseases that it's really like very specific in the genome. It's like just one gene. Um, I do believe they know how to kind of like um, turn them on or off. I think would be a slightly more correct way to talk about it. I don't know. I don't know if you could just give kids genes or I don't know the right way to talk about that. So I'm just going to be responsible and not talk about it. But good question. Point is though, you know, you're going to be able to do, as that develops, you're going to be able to fix lots of things with in utero editing. And personally, I'd rather wait for that. All right, that's the only question. All right, well, I gotta go. It's getting late here. It's already like I gotta put my kids to sleep. Thanks for hanging out. Good to see some friendly names in the chat. Hello, Ellie, and a few of other people who I remember from forever ago. So thanks for hanging out. Let me know. Give me feedback. Was this interesting? Was it not? I don't know. I just wanted to kind of have fun and come up for air. And now that the book is almost done and Knockchain's out into the world. I wanted to, yeah, just start coming up for air, play around with this, and see what it feels like. All right. Thanks, everyone. Over and out. Catch you later.